I can answer those now, at least for a while. I have to catch a flight to Ireland tonight, but we'll stay for a half hour, I guess. So, any questions or comments you might have? Sure.
I'll begin in that case. During the film, there were quite lots of references to what was going on in the outside world and the reaction internationally to the results that would come out of the elections. How conscious were ordinary Venezuelans outside of the political class of the international reaction, and how much was that feature of people's voting patterns?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it figured very prominently into the election itself. I think in talking with a lot of Venezuelans there and academics who were following the events, they all felt, and I felt based on speaking with Venezuelans there, that people were voting on national issues. They were looking amongst themselves locally and, you know, asking, are things better than they were 8 years ago? Are things going to get, you know, better under this candidate or under that candidate? And so I think that was how, you know, people voted. That said, you know, they do understand Chavez's influence internationally. And, you know, it was funny because we were in Venezuela covering how Chavez was doing in the Venezuelan elections, but, you know, it ended up being, how's Chavez doing in the UN vote, or how's Chavez doing in the Ecuadorian elections, because he figured very prominently there, and also in the Mexican elections as well. And so, it definitely changed, and we had to, you know, adjust some of our questions accordingly for that reason as well. But again, I think when it came time to vote in Venezuela, they were voting on national issues.
How did people respond to you guys being English speakers in Venezuela? Are they people pretty friendly, or do they just assume you're all Americans people?
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly cause for, if not concern, you know, attention. People wanted to know why these four gringos were in Venezuela asking what is Venezuela to everybody, you know. So it always took a period of explaining ourselves and really going into detail about, you know, who was funding the project, where it was going to be shown, what our goals were with the project. But after speaking with people on both sides of the aisle about why we were there and what we hoped to do, it was very well received by everyone, almost everyone, I'd say. And I don't think that necessarily hindered on our final project. I think people were just receptive that we were there, you know, asking questions for ourselves and producing something for ourselves, and not depending on, you know, other sources of information to figure out what was going on. And, you know, a lot of people would take us aside and say, you know, when Chavez says gringos go home, you know, he's not talking about you. He's talking about the government and about, you know, the U.S. specifically and their history of kind of overextending themselves in Venezuela and throughout Latin America. But they always made it a point to really emphasize to us that he wasn't talking about, you know, you as Americans.
Where are you from?
I'm from New Hampshire, actually, which is just north of Boston, in Newark. Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a superb film because you captured so well both sides of the argument. I think there's a tendency to see Chavez as a hero because he's helping the poor, and to therefore close your eyes to the rather more alarming side of what he's doing. I've been to Venezuela several times. I have family connections there actually, and I initially was over the moon when Chavez was elected, having seen the dreadful poverty in Venezuela. I was absolutely ecstatic when Chavez was elected, and I was forced, rather grudgingly, to have to admit that there's a nastier side to Chavez than I wanted to see. It took me a long time to come to that position. I have very mixed feelings now, even now, about Chavez, but I think you portrayed that really very well because people don't like to see the other side of Chavez.
Yeah. On both sides of the aisle, you know, people don't. There's been no sort of, you know, both because of on the part of the media, but also on the part of politicians, in Venezuela and abroad to portray this as a very simple AB polarized society, and I think what the film shows is it's much more complicated than that. You know, not everyone who supports Chavez blindly follows him in every direction that he wishes to lead them, and not everyone in the opposition is, as Chavez will put it, you know, bourgeois mama's boys, you know. So we tried to really expose that in the film and highlight that, and kind of present the film also as a filter through which you can receive information on Venezuela, because it continues to be very polarized. And you know, looking at the constitutional amendments that are coming to vote in December, you know, I agree with you in the sense that I think they're really problematic, because they're once again forcing everyone in Venezuela to subscribe to that AB structure. You know, for those of you who don't know, there are 69 amendments coming to vote on December 2nd, and it's a top-down vote. You vote yes for all 69, or you vote no for all 69. And so, you know, once again, in talking with a lot of Venezuelans featured in the film, they're having a lot of trouble right now in terms of mapping out how they want to see things move forward. And a big reason, a big part of that is, again, how it's being promoted, and this idea, you know, of the Bush doctrine, you're with us or you're against us. And, you know, it also applies to Chavez's case as well.
Yeah. Sorry, similar to Ollie's question, actually. I mean, you hear, especially in the U.S. and in a lot of the West, this kind of vilification of Chavez, this sort of this pariah of Latin America. And I was wondering, I mean, do you think that impacts the political process in Venezuela? Is that something like, do Venezuelans sort of feel more nationalistic because of that? Do they feel that they need to sort of defend themselves? And does that impact Chavez's popularity or sort of opposition towards him?
It definitely impacts it to a certain extent, but I think it's somewhat like a temporary impact. You know, in the long term, you know, people look at nationally what sort of conversations are going on Chavez. But you know, there's been studies where when Condoleezza Rice uses Chavez's name, you know, it's never in a positive light, and his popularity goes up 4 points every time she mentions him, and every time Bush mentions him. So that definitely has an impact on, you know, national sentiment about Chavez. But I think, again, when you're coming to major moments like a national election, people are looking at what the national opposition are saying, and not necessarily, you know, what the Miami Herald or you know, foreign influencers are saying.
So if like, not to, but like, is he sort of seen as a national defender in Venezuela? Is that how he seeks to portray himself, or is it sort of misperception?
Yeah, I mean, again, it kind of goes down party lines in the sense that, you know, those who support Chavez very much see him as, you know, a defender of Venezuela and a defender of Venezuela's interests, and to even on a broader scale to Latin America's interests. And those who don't support him, you know, believe that power is becoming increasingly concentrated on him, and it's his personal interests and not those of the country. So it's sort of one of those points on which people argue about Chavez and Chavismo. You know, one thing that can't be denied in recognizing the things that Chavez has done with his presidency is he has promoted Venezuela's agenda more than, you know, presidents in the past have. And I think in the film you see people on both sides of the aisle alluding to that fact.